family. Welcome back. Today I have Dr. Sloan R with us. She has a PhD and a CRC, and she graduated from the University of Arizona with a doctorate of philosophy in rehabilitation psychology. In her 34-year career, she has worked with individuals with disabilities, adolescents in the juvenile justice and foster care systems. She's taught college-level psychology classes to incarcerated adults, and she's maintained a full-time private practice for individual and family therapy for both adolescents and adults. Dr. King currently specializes in forensic evaluation, and she's licensed to practice in Arizona, Minnesota, and New York. Today, she is here with us to offer some general tips and advice on how to keep ourselves sane during this pandemic. So thank you, Dr. King, for being here with us today. How are you doing? How are you doing? How are you coping with this pandemic?
Well, as you know, very interesting times. In my household, all I can say is I think my dogs are quite happy that I'm home more, but my teenager, not so much, but other than that, coping.
So obviously this pandemic and this quarantine is unlike anything that I've ever seen, unlike anything pretty much everyone has ever seen. And for those people who are unfamiliar with what anxiety or mental issues and mental disorders look like, what are those signs and symptoms that we should be looking out for in our friends and our family members and in acquaintances?
That's a great question. Some of the same things that we would see during any period of, well, I should say just anxiety in general tends to look the same. But what we're going to probably start seeing is people not sleeping, increased, we're kind of seeing people with trying to manage their anxiety with increased substance use. So they might be drinking more. There might be some, drug use to kind of manage that. But some of the other anxious symptoms that we see, again, I'll make reference to 9/11 because that's about the closest thing probably in even my generation that we have. But people start having kind of somewhat disrupted or vivid dreams. So when we're anxious, we start to dream, even if the dream isn't exactly about what's going on. So although in 9/11, a lot of New Yorkers were having dreams of buildings falling, even though they weren't a part, or, they weren't actually involved directly. So it's almost this collective dreaming that we do. I know I've had some weird dreams that are just stress related.
Because, so I'm sure you've heard of TikTok and the new platform. Everyone has been saying, I don't know about you, but I've been having such vivid dreams. And you read the comments and it's crazy. Almost every single person is saying, oh my gosh, me too. This is crazy. What's happening? So I had no idea that was like a symptom or something that could say, hey, they're probably dealing with anxiety or symptoms of anxiousness. If you do see someone who is struggling and exhibiting symptoms of anxiety or other mental health issues, what advice would you have in going about a situation like that and approaching them?
It's going to sound so basic. Just talking to the person, not being afraid to just say, hey, you know what, it kind of looks like you've been struggling, or, especially if you know the individual and you might have observed some things like, we were gonna, you were sleeping in, or I thought we were gonna talk, anything. Sometimes people get so hung up worrying about what the right thing is, to say, that they end up not saying much or just kind of avoiding. And honestly, it's more calming for someone to know that people are noticing. It's almost a relief, like, oh yeah, so you noticed, thank you.
Additionally, so, I've been in my house now for almost 3 months straight. I came home for spring break. I didn't get to leave. So I'm really at that point where I'm missing my friends and I'm missing that social interaction. I know here in Arizona, guidelines and restrictions are starting to lift, but in a bunch of places, unfortunately, like in Chicago, back home, they're not lifting, and quarantine is still happening for a while. What advice would you give to people who are still stuck in isolation?
I think I again would go back to a lesson learned from 9/11. Uh, some psychologists came up with something they called I call it the 3 C's, just to make it a little more user friendly. But and really anything I'm talking about today you can probably apply to any stress in your life, but it's particularly, I think, apropos now. So the first thing is controlling what you can control. And that for me just is kind of a big one, because right now there's so little you can control that literally whatever in your daily life, and it may not seem like much, but if you can control and create like a daily routine.
Okay.
It may be very different than what you've ever done before, but that's, what you set out to do. Looking forward, trying to think about what will life, one day, things will be different. One other quick thing I would add is just the self-care, eating well, trying to sleep well, trying to, do those things we're always supposed to do. But, personally, I think I've put on a few pounds, just with, I don't know, being out of my routine.
Yeah.
Then the connection piece. So, the second C, you just have to find those creative ways. And your age group is pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. But also on that note, a lot of older people aren't able to use technology.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, I have to go back to writing letters or just the things that using the telephone, things that work for that generation. But anyway, you can stay creative. The third C, it's coherence, which to me, that's kind of a fancy way to say that you're trying to kind of keep yourself together with like mindfulness practices. So those are the biggies most people have heard of, like meditation or deep breathing. And I know that might sound kind of hokey, like, oh yeah, deep breathing, what's that going to do? But if you've ever done a bit of that or done yoga, it's always amazing where it's like, oh yeah, that is kind of helpful. My own thing that I add is humor. I think that not mocking people or minimizing our fear of this whole thing, but you have to keep laughing in ways that you can, even if it's at yourself. Like, I took my temperature 10 times today, and when am I going to stop doing that? I'm fine.
There are a lot of fears about there being a second wave of the coronavirus. I believe parts of China are on lockdown again right now. How can people deal with these thoughts about a second wave coming, and how can they deal with these fears about a possible second wave, especially now that we're trying to re-enter society?
Yeah, that was a tough question. What I came up with is reminding people of what they've already done. So I think probably for most people, they've already gone through several weeks of quarantine and self-isolation. And just to remind people you've done it. If it ends up being that you have to do it again, you've learned some life lessons. I mean, we all have.
Well, you answered all of my questions. Thank you so much for doing this. I loved having you. I loved talking to you about all those concerns that people are having. I mean, concerns that I've been having too. So it was super helpful. And thank you so much for, letting me interview you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Model Hunt family and friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for our next episode of Blyssful.